Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for joining me here today at Re-Written Vintage Homestead. We're in the middle of September, and I still have a whole lot going on in the garden, mainly with my tomatoes. So, I don't care if I see another tomato for the rest of the year, but until then, I can't just let them go to waste, right? I need to be making things out of these. I need to preserve them. I need to get them where I can, just like I've talked about in several of my other episodes. So I've made spaghetti sauce, I've made tomato juice, I've made tomato sauce, I've made salsa, basically anything you can think of that starts with a tomato. But today I'm going to work on Christmas gifts and I'm going to make tomato jam. Now, tomato jam you don't hear of very much, but it's a southern dish. And it's a highly priced southern dish, and it's wonderful on cornbread, on biscuits, on crackers with cream cheese, on scrambled eggs, on just about anything you can think of. So I'm going to have you join me today as we make tomato jam. When it comes to cooking your tomatoes and getting them ready, everybody has a different way of doing things. So I'm just going to show you how I do them here. And if you like them, then great, score one for me. And if you don't, you can just say, my Nana never did it that way. And keep doing it the way you always did it. So I'm going to show you how I cook my tomatoes. Come on down here. So after I've washed them really well, I'm going to cut off the top here. Then that leaves the core in the middle. So I just take my knife and core it real quick. And on the top, I slice an X. Just like that. If there's any blemishes, I'm trying to see. Like right here on this tomato, I'm going to have to cut all that out. If there's any bruises or blemishes, they have to go. This will have to go. There's a little blemish that'll have to go. So I'll trim those. But when you make the X on the bottom, after you boil them, that just peels right off and makes it easier. So right now I've got my water boiling next to me. I'm going to drop my tomatoes in for about 3 to 4 minutes, just until the skin starts bubbling up. Then I place them in ice water real quick, drain them, and start peeling off the skin. So I'll show you that process in just a minute. When it comes to making things like tomato jam and tomato soup, it really doesn't matter what kind of tomatoes you use. So in my jam today, I've got these burgundy red, I've got the yellow, gold, I've got just your regular beef boy, and then I have Cherokee red. So just use up whatever you have in the garden. I wouldn't mess with your small ones, like your Roma tomatoes. Save those for like your tomato sauce, your tomato paste, and your spaghetti sauce. But any big tomatoes that you have that you need to use up, these are good recipes for like your tomato jam and your tomato soup. You want to make sure when your tomatoes are boiling that you keep stirring them so that they don't scorch on the bottom. So after they've gotten nice and hot in my kettle here, I use a slotted spoon and I put them in an ice bath. I save my milk containers here and I put them in the freezer for several reasons. One of them is because your freezer works more efficiently if it's full. So things like this, like water bottles and milk jugs, they help to take up space in your freezer. Also, too, in case of an emergency, then you have extra ice in case your power goes out. And I like to use it for things like this because I don't want my tomato soup, my tomato sauce, whatever I'm making, to just end up being a slop of water. And so I use very little water, but I cool it down here with my jug. You can even see how the jug is steaming between the ice and the hot tomatoes. So they're going to cool down very quickly. I'm just putting them in here long enough so that they get cool that I can handle them, which won't be long. So we'll let those sit there for just a minute and then we'll start peeling. So I only leave my tomatoes in the ice water for just a few minutes just so I can handle them. And I want to show you how the skin just peels right off. Here you go. So you take your skin, peel that off. You might need a little help from a knife. And it's like I said, everybody has a different way of doing things. This is how I do it. It seems to save me a lot of the tomato. I don't lose so much this way. And this is also, I want to remind you, an excellent time to save your seeds. Do you see how they're left behind in the bottom of the pan there? So if there's a specific hybrid or type of tomato that you would like to make sure you have next year, save those seeds. Put them in a very small strainer, swirl them around a little bit, separate them from the goo, and you're good to go. And you can see, you guys, this isn't all that messy. It's mostly just water. And most of the skin has already fallen off before I even get to it. Here we go. So I just pick it off. So I'm going to keep doing this. I'm going to dice up my tomatoes. And then we'll try to put them through a colander and get rid of most of the seeds. Now that my tomatoes are all cooked, I'm going to put them in my handy dandy strainer here, which I believe is actually called a chinois. But here on the homestead, we're going to call it a strainer. And it's got this little pedestal here that you can use. I like to use the round end. And so you're just going to push. And the mesh here is so fine that your seeds aren't going to go through. So all you're going to get is nice, pure juice. Now I'm going to continue doing this until I have about 6 cups. So just to give you guys an idea, it took 3 of those 5-gallon buckets for me to get 6 cups. So it's a lot of tomatoes to make the tomato jam recipe. But that's something nice to do at the end of the season when you've already made your spaghetti sauce and your other things that you need for your meals. This is a nice treat or something nice to do for gifts. So it's a good thing to do with your end of harvest tomatoes. So I'm going to keep squishing this until I have 6 cups. Now this is all my leftover pulp after I have processed the juice out of it. But I want you guys to see there's still a whole lot of juice in there. I'm sure you can see the liquid that's floating around in there. So I'm going to take this, I'm going to put it in my blender, I'm going to process it, then I'm going to pull it through my strainer one more time to get the rest of the juice. I don't want any of this to go to waste. And then whatever pulp I have left is going to go out in the garden to feed my soil. And after processing that in the mixer, I got a whole lot more. Beautiful pulp. So I'm going to pour that in there, and then I'm going to take my utensil here and squeeze it through some more. See, you want to get every bit that you can. Don't waste any. And none of these tomatoes are going to waste. Like I said, if you have pigs, you can feed the slop to the pigs. If you have a nice garden, you can throw it out there and let it feed your soil. Or if you just have a bare spot out in your yard that you've had a heck of a time getting grass to grow, start feeding the dirt a little bit with some of your kitchen compost. There we go. See, that got me about another whole cup. And none of the seeds made it through. There we go. See? Okay, so we're going to keep pureeing and straining, and then we're going to move on. So now's the fun part. I had 6 cups of my tomato puree. So I've got it on the stove, and I let it boil. You have to stir constantly or it's going to be popping all over your stove. So you're going to let it boil for about 10 minutes just to get more of that liquid out. Then once you do that, you're going to add equal parts sugar to your tomato puree. So I'm going to add 6 cups of sugar to 6 cups of my tomato puree. Now you're going to want this to boil, and you're going to be stirring occasionally for about a half an hour because we want this to thicken. So add your sugar a little at a time. Get it stirred in. Let it come to a nice boil and just sit back and watch TV and let it boil for about 30 minutes.
Quite a few rocks in Pennsylvania. That's a good question, and I'm not gonna lie, I'm not an expert on rock importation, so I have no idea. Yeah, I'm not either. I'm gonna read up on it. So, what kinds of crops does the landslide eat? Well, it's interesting. When they first found the lantern fly, they thought that it was only the trees of Haven that were getting high. And then over time, they found out that they're actually attacking grapes, particularly wine grapes. And it caused something like $50 million in damage in Pennsylvania. And now there are statements saying that these flies are attacking all kinds of fruit, which the research seems a little bit mixed. But as far as how big of a problem this is, it's a problem as old as time, right? It's humans and pests, and I don't think it's really that big of an issue on a global scale. Wait, they're attacking wine grapes? So this is another group of immigrants that people with Martha's Vineyard don't want here. I don't think anybody wants them here. You know, I'm talking about wine grapes, of course. I know. Because who's the most popular president in American history? Everybody's like those, which is only real poll. Was Richard Nixon.
Look at this tomato. It's like this is the mother and this is the baby tomato. And it says, I'm never going to get ripe because I don't want to go into tomato jam.